Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Andrew Yang, and we're going to talk about a powerful tactic that Andrew Yang can use right now to pick up 1 to 5 million votes. Those 1 to 5 million votes will adhere to him very strongly. They'll be sticky, right? They'll be hard for other candidates to take away, and it's likely that those 1 to 5 million votes will come straight out of Trump's base. All right? So let's talk about it. All right. So in addition to what I just talked about, the actual flavor of this content today is about Star Wars. Okay? Star Wars as a commercial venture and Star Wars as a fandom. All right. So let's talk about this. All right. So, there's a lot going on with Star Wars right now. And in fact, both the Star Wars commercial venture owned by Disney, right, and the Star Wars fandom, absolutely not owned by Disney or any other person. It's its own organic thing, right? They're both in crisis, right? So yesterday it was announced that Benioff and Weiss, the people who created Game of Thrones, were quitting Star Wars to go over to Netflix, right? This was very upsetting to a lot of people. It was, at minimum, it was a significant change in the plans for Star Wars, and it was very significant. Right, this was a significant change, and you could tell. And it's a hit to Kathleen Kennedy, because she actually said, "Oh, I would like Benioff and Weiss to come back after their schedule frees up," right? And which I was shocked to see that she said that, because it admits, like, this wasn't something she wanted, because there was a debate that it was something she wanted because the ending of Game of Thrones was so bad, right? But just to put it in perspective, right? Think about just what I just said. You're talking about Disney, one of the largest entertainment creators in the world. You're talking about Netflix, a corporation that has billions and billions and billions of dollars on the line, and is one of the main combatants in the streaming wars, right? And you're talking about HBO Max, another major... by the way, this is all about the streaming wars, right? You're talking about HBO, another major combatant in the streaming wars. Disney, with Disney Plus, is a major combatant in the streaming wars. And there's going to be commercial blood on the floor, man. This is going to be daggers out, right? Like, this streaming thing is for... It's at minimum tens of billions of dollars on the line. It's quite possible hundreds of billions of dollars on the line. This is a huge portion of our GDP, right? Like, it's a big deal, right? There is a lot on the line here. That happened yesterday. That's not even the worst thing that's happened in Star Wars recent history. The worst thing that happened in Star Wars history is Andrew Yang's opportunity. Let's talk about it. All right. So about 4 or 5 weeks ago, Bob Iger, he is the CEO of Disney. He wrote a book, okay? He actually released a book that he had written, and it was called The Ride of a Lifetime, and it was his story for being president of Disney for 15 years straight, okay? So basically, Bob Iger wrote this book. Excuse me. All right, he wrote this book, and it was his story about being CEO of Disney. In this, he said some absolutely shocking things about Star Wars. Things that will have ramifications for decades, for probably 10, 20, or 30 years. The words in this book will be impacting the entire Star Wars fandom, and will most likely impact the Star Wars commercial venture, right? Now, the reason why we're talking about this in connection to Andrew Yang, is this is incredible. This has a lot to do with American politics, American culture, and American society, and it is a very distinct opportunity for Andrew Yang to pick up votes, right? But you have to understand the nuances of it, so I appreciate your patience with this. All right, so basically, Bob Iger comes out, and in his book, he tells the following story. He says, when Disney went to acquire Star Wars from George Lucas, it was a challenging negotiation, right? And we bought the scripts for 7, 8, and 9 from George Lucas, right? It was a separate line item in the contract, and we bought them because we felt we had to, right? And then he says, later I discovered that George Lucas felt betrayed that we did not use his scripts at all when we created episodes 7, 8, and 9. And I was surprised that he felt betrayed, and the reason why is in the contract we had made it very clear that we were not contractually obligated to use the scripts we had bought, right? So he was saying, I'm surprised that George Lucas didn't realize that I'm a big-time CEO of Mogul, and that if you don't have it in writing with me, you certainly can't take any of my indications as what I'll actually do. I'm only going to do what I'm required to by law. I'm not going to treat you like a human being and do the things that I've indicated I would do, right? Like it is shocking that he put this in his book. This isn't even the worst part, right? So he explains how George Lucas felt betrayed because George Lucas didn't understand that whatever was indicated by the purchase of scripts 7, 8, and 9, the purchase of those should not have been a clue to George Lucas that they were going to use them to actually make 7, 8, and 9, right? That he should have understood that they were just going to throw them in the trash, right? And write whatever the heck they wanted, because that's what the contract said, right? Like, it's so galling and it's so amazing that Bob Iger be like, why didn't he know I was a jerk? Right? Like like when you listen to Iger, you're like, holy cows, man. Like, and this goes back to we've talked about this before, this idea of self-awareness. I don't think Bob Iger has very much self-awareness at all, right? Incredible business person, but not self-aware, right? Clearly, right? All right. So the next thing he said is and by the way he found out that Lucas felt betrayed, right, was that I was like, why did Bob Iger even know that Lucas felt betrayed? Why did Bob Iger even deal with George Lucas after the purchase, right? And then I remembered Star Wars Celebration. Star Wars Celebration happens every year. It is a massive convention. Like tens of millions, maybe even $100 million is spent on this convention. Like all the major fans go to this thing. They have all the major Star Wars people showing up for this thing every year. And George Lucas goes to that. And Disney pays him big money to go to that, right? And so Bob Iger and George Lucas were both at Star Wars Celebration. So that's why all this back and forth happened between them. And they both had to be there because it helped both of their causes, right? Whew. All right. So the next thing that said, and this is the real kicker, this is the opportunity for Yang. The next thing that Bob Iger said in his book is he said, George Lucas felt betrayed when he found out that we had completely ignored his scripts for 7, 8, and 9, right? And then he felt additionally, he was upset when he saw Force Awakens, episode 7, because he said, George Lucas said to me, Bob Iger, he said, there is nothing, he watched the movie and then he said, Bob, there is nothing new here. You have nothing new in the narrative here, right? And in addition to that, you did not push forward movie technology. Two things that every Star Wars has had. New things in the narrative. New things in the narrative, right? Like new things. And moving movie technology forward. Two things that Star Wars has always stood for. It's not here. I can't believe Bob Iger said this in his book. He said, I was surprised that George Lucas didn't understand that there was nothing new in Star Wars and we did not progress movie technology because our goal was to make sure people who had saw the first Star Wars, right, felt very comfortable with how similar this movie was. Now, when I heard this, I was like, oh my gosh, right? So Bob Iger did something, and I don't think he really understood what he was doing at the time, right? Again, because he's not self-aware, right? There has been a huge debate in the Star Wars fandom about 7, 8, and 9. So here's been the debate, right? Basically, the debate was, is this commercial pablum that has been served up, and the people who like it because it feels comfortable and similar to them, or is there a unique element in this that makes it a true piece of art, right? Well, that debate has been raging, right? And I have been on the true piece of art side, right? I was a fool. Like Bob Iger said, this was not, 7, 8, and 9 were never intended to be true pieces of art. They are comfort food, right? This is like if a world-class, if somebody funds a dinner and they get a world-class chef and they say to the chef, listen, I want you to create comfort food, make some banana bread, but I want you to put green icing on the top, right? And the green icing will be in the shape of an unknown symbol, right? The people who and the people at the dinner can debate. Was that just banana bread, the same thing served up that you could get served up anywhere, or did we get a special creation from this artist? With the green frosting in an unknown shape, which actually subverted the art, which subverted the banana bread, and made it a true unique piece of art, right? Well, what's happened here is that the person who funded that dinner has come out and said there was never any intention for art. It was always just the banana bread, right? So I was incredibly hurt by Bob Iger's words. I'm a Star Wars fan. I saw Star Wars when I was 7 years old in Savannah, Georgia. The movie theater where I saw it has burned down. I know that because I tried to go back and see Star Wars 7 at that theater, right? Like, I can't. I've taken vacations to go see Star Wars movies, right? I want to give you my bona fides on Star Wars, right? My father told me when I was young. He said, "Hey, Scott, you're a man, and men don't cry, like, in public. There's only one time when you're justified to cry in public, right?" He said, if a bear has attacked you, and you have multiple visible wounds, the bear has given you multiple visible wounds from its claw bite attack, right? Then, and only then, are you justified as a man to cry, right? Two years ago, Carrie Fisher passed. I was in my living room. I looked at it on my phone, and I had to excuse myself. I said to we have a small house, right? So if I just walk out of the room and I don't say anything to anybody, it could be, if my wife doesn't know where I am, it could be an issue, right? And I feel bad about this. I actually lied, and I said, I'm going to go pray, right? And I just walked upstairs, and I sat on my bed upstairs in my bedroom with the door closed, and I cried because Carrie Fisher had died. Right? Couldn't let my family see that, right? Because of what my father had said. And I lied about praying. It was a bad situation. But I care very, very deeply about Star Wars, right? And I really was on board. And I was the one debating, hey, this is true art. Don't just, insult what Disney has done here. I was wrong. Bob Iger said this was never intended to be art. This was just banana bread. It was supposed to be familiar, and you would like it because you've had it before. It was commercial pablum, right? Bob Iger ended the debate on whether Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 are true art or commercial pablum. I have no idea why on earth he would have done this. I think the reason he has done this is not actually to sell a bunch of books. I think he was incented by his publishers to sell books, right? But the reality is, I think the damage from his words will run so deep. And this cut, there'll be so much commercial blood from this cut that he could not have possibly known what he was doing. I think his lack of self-awareness allowed him to say these outrageously foolish words. Outrageously foolish, right? And now the debate is over. We don't get to, okay, let me explain this, right? Gwen Stefani, one of the most brilliant artists on the planet, right? She did a song called Hollaback Girl, and I remember an interviewer said to her, hey, Gwen Stefani, what is a hollaback girl, right? And she smiled, and she said one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard an artist say. She said, I know what a hollaback girl is, but I'm not going to tell you. And the reason why is when someone listens to my song, Hollaback Girl, a hollaback girl is what they think it is. And I will never steal that interpretation from them. I know what it is, right? But I want each person to have in their own mind what a hollaback girl is. Like, Bob Iger needs to sit at the feet of Gwen Stefani, right? Bob Iger has done massive massive damage that will last 1, 2, or 3 decades for Star Wars, right? Because all the fans who are trying to defend Disney have no ground to stand on anymore, right? Bob Iger said this was never meant to be art. This is, with his words, this is what I think he actually said, right? He's like, this was never meant to be art. This was always banana bread, right? The green frosting symbol on top meant nothing, right? The debate is over. It's just commercial pablum, right? Like, and it was so upsetting. Like, it was just so upsetting to me, right? Not as upsetting as when Carrie Fisher died, right? Now, how can Andrew Yang use this? Well, what he could do is he could put his headphones on and quickly listen on 1.2 speed. He can listen to Bob Iger's book. And then when he's done, he can get in front of the next reporter who stumbles across him and say, listen, thanks for your question about UBI. I also have something to say about Star Wars. I want to say to all the Star Wars fans out there that I have sympathy for you that Bob Iger betrayed the vision of George Lucas. And that I wish Bob Iger had allowed the Star Wars films to contain true art, rather than allowing it to have nothing new in the narrative and to not advance movie technology in any way, which had been a Star Wars tradition for over 25 years. Right? If he says this, right, and I hate. Okay, here's the thing. Like, we're there. We are there, right? So if he says this, he is going to cut right to an incredibly important base of voters, right? There are a ton of people. There are millions of people just like me. Millions of them. You know how I know there are millions of them? Because Star Wars movies have done $2 billion worth of business. That means you have millions of viewers, right? There are millions, I would say 1 to 5 million people just like me who care incredibly deeply about Star Wars, right? And when they hear him say this, when they hear that he understands the incredibly nuanced position between Bob Iger and George Lucas, and a lot of people will be like, who cares? This is billionaires fighting with billionaires. And they're 100% right? But I care, right? It doesn't matter to me that both Bob Iger and George Lucas are billionaires, right? I side with George Lucas now, right? And even though he's a billionaire, I have incredible sympathy for him, right? And I have lost a ton of goodwill for Bob Iger. I may never get that goodwill back, right? Because he purposely ended the debate on whether Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 were actually true art or just commercial pablum, right? Before, the experiencers of the art could decide for themselves. Now, the person who literally funded the whole thing, right, and was in charge of all the art creators on the project, has said, no. This was banana bread. The green frosting in the unknown symbol on the top was always meaningless, right? And I'm surprised that George didn't understand that. He didn't even understand that we had succeeded in what we were trying to do. That's literally what he said in the book. George Lucas didn't understand that we had succeeded in what we were trying to do, and he didn't even understand that what we were trying to do was good. Like, I was stunned by the words that Bob Iger said, right? So if Andrew Yang comes along and he says, I think it's terrible that Bob Iger betrayed George Lucas's vision, and I think that the scripts for 7, 8, and 9 should have been used, right? He allies himself with millions of Star Wars viewers who care incredibly deeply about this topic, right? And then in addition to that, I apologize for saying this, right? But we do have to talk about this. So the New Hampshire poll came out, and we've learned a lot of lessons from it. One thing we learned is that old people absolutely rule politics, and young people really don't vote, right? That's true, right? And the thing is, you know what old people care about? They care about death, right? So I'm old. I'm 49 years old, right? I care a lot about Star Wars, right? And if there's somebody like me who doesn't care about politics, and Andrew Yang comes out and says this incredibly nuanced thing about Star Wars, it's going to stick in their mind, right? And they're going to go, I didn't really know who I was going to vote for, but this guy cares about Chewbacca. And I care about Chewbacca. I'm going to give him my vote. And if you don't think people vote like that, you're not paying attention, right? Like in the New Hampshire poll, Bernie Sanders, a 78-year-old man who just had a heart attack, ranked number 1 in the polls. People are not voting on logic. They're voting on dreams. They're voting on preference. They're voting on, people who are like them, right? It's just, there's no logic connected to votes anymore, right? And so that's the point, is this is a path to a small amount of time spent, right? No actual cost, no money spent, right? But you could get 1 to 5 million votes. Now, why is that important? Why is it important to get 1 to 5 million votes? Well, it's really important to get 1 to 5 million votes. And the reason why is if you get those votes, you can control, that's the difference between 4 and 5%. That's the difference between getting another poll that qualifies you for the December debate and not getting it, all right? So these are free votes, and he can just come down and grab them and take them, right? And here's the kicker. If he says this now, and then Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford die before the election, his quote will be run again and again and again and again, right? This is rock solid 1 to 5 million votes, just like that, for nothing. They're low-hanging fruit, and Andrew Yang should take them. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.